Well, thank you to all our viewers that are tuning back into another CSE listed issuer update. I'm Anil Mall. I represent the Canadian Securities Exchange. And today I am talking to Tyrone Docherty. Tyrone is the CEO of First Tellurium Corp. Of course, it's listed on the CSE. Tyrone, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Well, thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to talk about the company.
Excellent. Tellurium. It's an interesting, topic. I don't think very many people might be familiar with what tellurium is. So why don't we jump into a little bit about tellurium, and then you can tell us a little bit about First Tellurium Corp as a company as well.
Yeah, well, tellurium's one of the most critical metals on the planet. It's the 8th or 9th rarest metal in the world. And you're not alone. Most people did not know what tellurium was until a few years ago. And it's taken the movement to get noticed because of the cadmium tellurium solar panels, which are very big. And now with the recent patent by the University of British Columbia on a lithium tellurium battery, certainly is catching people by storm, to say the least. But we're not just a tellurium company, but that's sort of what separates us from everyone else. We're the only company on the planet doing what we're doing.
So what is it that you do?
Well, it's kind of funny. There's so many things we do that most people, if they hear the story, they really don't believe what we do. So what we have, we got two phenomenal properties. One in British Columbia called the Deerhorn property. That is a high-grade gold, silver tellurium property. And when I say high grade, we're talking open pitable, which is average a little over 5 grams of gold per ton and 157 grams of silver. So to say the least, that would be considered high grade, and our tellurium happens to come with it. And it's open pitable, so obviously it's much cheaper than going underground. So we have those advantages as well. And a property in Colorado, which is, I would call it super high grade tellurium, because it used to be owned by First Solar. It's a company that needs tellurium for their solar panels. And just to put things in perspective for your audience, is that our Deerhorn property is considered high grade. We have an average of 160 grams per ton of tellurium, with our highest grade being 800 to 900 grams. That's considered high grade. The Colorado property, high grade, is 33,000 grams per ton, so 3.3 kilograms, with many samples in the 10 to 15,000 gram range. So it's a different beast entirely. And I say, thankfully, over the last couple of years, the U.S. government and Canadian government has put it on their critical list, and everyone's looking for domestic supplies. And we're going to move our property forward in Canada towards production because of our high-grade gold and silver. The tellurium happens to come with it, so we get the best of both worlds.
I think it's also very important to mention that both those properties, they're in stable mining-friendly jurisdictions like BC and Colorado. So that alleviates a lot of the back and forth that might happen with a property that's not in a friendly area.
Well, yeah, that's how we do things. I mean, there's always opportunities to go off to far-flung places in the world looking for, unique minerals, but with different governments to deal with. And we prefer, for shareholders. I'm the largest shareholder, so I want to make sure my money's safe. So we go to jurisdictions where, that you get a plan moving forward. And like, for example, in British Columbia, it's very important to have good First Nations relationships. So I would say that if anyone looks at our background, I don't know of any junior or mid-tier that has as good a relationship with the First Nations as we do. And it's not something we just talk about, we walk the walk. For example, my chairman of the board, Tony Fogarassi, he, multi-talented, not only graduate gold medalist in geology at UBC, but he's also got a law degree in natural resources. But more importantly, if he's not the top First Nations lawyer in British Columbia, certainly in the top 2. So he's managed to have all these relationships over the last 35 years, basically showing the board of directors here how you have to navigate things to make sure that you're not offside. So our relationship is phenomenal. And if you're serious about building a mine in BC, that's one of the key components, to have good relationships with the First Nations, and ours is phenomenal.
Well said. I want to talk a little bit about the global solar panel market. I know you're focused more on the solar PV. I want to also know what solar PV is, but why don't you give us a little insight on where we're at in 2023 when it comes to the global solar market?
Well, obviously, people understand with what's going on in the States is that they're moving the green minerals forward. So there's going to be more and more solar plants built and uses for residential and commercial. And right now, there's basically two types of solar panels: the silica, which mostly comes from China, and the cadmium tellurium, which is basically produced by the biggest solar company in the United States, First Solar. And President Biden has given them all types of extra money to keep pushing their product forward, because there's the threat of stopping stopping imports of all critical metals, not just tellurium, from China. And China supplies about 60% of the tellurium market. There's obviously some other suppliers, but if they sort of go to the side, there's going to be a big crunch. But more importantly, Neil, is that about 14 months or so ago, the CEO of First Solar said that starting in 2025, they're going to need, just for themselves, somewhere between 900 to 1,100 tons of tellurium. Okay, that might not mean anything to anyone, except they understand that the world supply is 600 tons of tellurium. So just themselves are going to need 70% in addition to what's being supplied now. Then if you throw in the potential stoppage of imports from China, which is for 6%, there's going to be a huge bottleneck, which is why we're getting lots of attention. And then that doesn't throw in the equation the other people that need to learn, such as thermoelectric use, and now this new battery from University of British Columbia, lithium tellurium battery. So we're sitting in a good spot, but shareholders should know, or sorry, your clients should know, is that we're not dependent on tellurium. It represents about 5 to 10% of our overall value coming out, but it's something where people need, they're going to come and talk to you.
Now, what's the difference between traditional solar and solar PV?
Well, it's just a different manufacturer. And to be honest with you, shareholders, you're probably talking to the wrong end of the horse. What I do is I surround myself with really bright people. I don't pretend to know everything I don't. And that sort of stands me in good stead, is that all I know is that there's a big demand for solar panels, and especially PVs, because apparently it's better and the results are quicker. But again, it's more of an American thing, so to speak, is that the solar, First Solar is using cadmium tellurium, and that's what's going to help us move forward, because the U.S. government and Canadian government are looking for domestic supplies and or from friendly sources.
Like any other industry, there are always challenges that groups and companies like yourself have to then learn to navigate around. What would you say has been one of the biggest challenges as a whole industry that you and your team are trying to move past?
Well, I think our challenges are rather limited in the sense that we have this phenomenal mineral that's very much in demand and growing, and we have two governments in Canada and the United States that's pushing green energy, so we're very fortunate. And more importantly, because it's not going to be a drag on our bottom line, we're not dependent on it. We're going to make most of our money on the gold and silver, so if for some reason there's no interest in tellurium, which won't happen, well, we'll just store it then until the interest comes around, so it won't affect our progress. And then, Anil, which I think the viewers would be interested to know, is that still the greenest metal of all is copper. And there's a huge demand for copper. So it just so happened that last October and September, our qualified person, Dr. Lee Grote, a professor at University of British Columbia, world-renowned geologist, who also consults for the government of Japan and government of India, he confirmed that we're sitting on a copper porphyry, which we've done nothing about. So it's the other side of the mountain. So this summer, we're going to drill that as well. And if, in fact, the copper porphyry proves what Dr. Grote thinks it will, then all of a sudden it could be an avalanche of people that need copper. So we're sitting in an absolutely wonderful situation as we speak.
I would say that's a decent safety net to have.
Oh, absolutely. And then what we've done recently, if people look at our news releases, that, when mining gets really going, sometimes it's tough to get drilling companies, because they're busy doing other people pay higher prices, if you will. So we have actually purchased our own drill middle of February from a group up in Alaska that had a brand new drill that was scheduled to go onto the Pebble. And they decided to sell it to us at a discount. And that was because the driller who walked the property with Dr. Grote in October phoned them and said, this is a phenomenal property. So they sold it to us on one condition, Anil. They wanted shares and not cash. So that kind of says all you need to know. Is that when someone else says, people tell me to work for me, oh, it's a good property. But when you have them saying, hey, we've heard it's pretty good, we'll take shares instead of cash, that sort of sums it all up.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, speaking of news, your team also put out some very recent news. I think it was just earlier this week, if I'm not wrong, that talked a little bit about the lithium-ion battery fires and sort of government stands around that topic. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I'm glad you asked me about that, because that's what really got people interested in our stock a year ago. We put out news on January 26th of 2022 that the University of British Columbia with their partner Phoenix Advanced Material, patented a lithium tellurium battery, which is far superior to a lithium-ion battery for 5 reasons. Number 1, it's 4 to 10 times more powerful. Number 2, easier to charge. Number 3, lasts twice as long. Number 4, size-wise. Here's the size of a lithium-ion battery. I'll go this way. Okay, now lithium tellurium battery, which is far superior as for the reasons I mentioned, you measure between your thumb and your forefinger. So I say to people, what would that do for people looking for weight for cars or whatever the case is? And the 5th and final advantage is what we're talking about now, is that it's a solid state battery, which means it cannot catch fire. As I said at a recent conference, lithium-ion batteries can and do catch fire. And as our news release yesterday said, that the recent big 5-alarm fire in New York City was started by an electric bike because of a lithium-ion battery. So this, I believe, is going to open up to a lot of opportunities for us, because the Department of Energy, the U.S. Department of Energy, about a year ago, set aside $3 billion, that's with a B, for the advancement of better lithium batteries. So they had no knowledge about this patent that the University of British Columbia did. So I could suggest to you, I'm not going to say anything's going to happen, but one would have to be logical and say, well, if you've got a battery that doesn't catch fire and is far superior to some other reasons, I think that at least would take my call. So we're sitting there pretty good.
I appreciate the insight as I like to call myself an outsider looking into this industry and trying to learn, which I'm sure a lot of our audience members are in the same sort of boat. We're obviously a quarter into the beginning of this year, and we've got about 8 more months left in 2023. Where do you see your group and company headed in the next, 6 to 8 months?
Well, that's good, because we're going to, as I mentioned, we just got our own drill. So we're going to go up there and start drilling in August, because we're up a mountain a little bit. But prior to that, we're going to IP survey on the property probably late May, early June. And then Dr. Grode is sending up 5 of his grad students to do soil sampling across the whole property, because up until recently, because we went up the mountain, we've been covered by snow and ice. So now it's starting to melt. There's opportunities to see what else is up there, and then we'll start drilling it. And before that, we'll be down in Klondike doing some exploration work on the property in Colorado, and get ready to do some drilling, whether we do the drilling before we drill at Deerhorn or drill afterwards, because we can work 10 months of the year down there. We're going to have lots of news coming forward. And as we say, we expect to have some exciting news. And I always sort of get intrigued by people that have the adage that, you buy on rumor, sell on news. And if people look at myself and my history, there is never any rumors. So when we put out news and people take the adage, well, let's sell, it's kind of like, why the heck are you selling? Like, can you not read the news? Like, we do things differently. We build companies differently. When people phone up to ask me, should I buy or sell? I say, well, first, I'm not allowed to legally tell you. And I don't really care if someone's a billionaire or a pensioner. I just build the company the way it should be built, like we were successful in our last deal. And the people with real checks will come to buy out. And I fully expect within a couple of years that will probably end up getting bought out by someone that needs a tellurium, whether it's for EVs or whether it's for these lithium tellurium batteries, or maybe it's a copper company. But, that's our history. We build something, and then I sold my last company, which I can talk about. The negotiation took 10 minutes.
On that topic, let's talk a little bit about your background for those that might not know, what you've accomplished and how you've gotten into this space.
Well, yeah, I'm glad, because I sort of keep a low profile, believe it or not. It's probably sort of anathema to a mining promoter, if you will, but I do keep it because I think if you try and get caught up in some of the PDACs trying to scream louder than your neighbor next door, it sort of confuses people. So my first company, I sold my first company, I was 27 years old, but I took over a company of Quinto Mining, Quinto, in 1997. It had a market cap of $4 million. It was mainly graphite before graphite was sexy. And then I sold the company 11 years later for $175 million. And we decided to take paper in that company. It was called Consolidated Thompson Iron Mine. So we ended up owning about 20 to 21% of them. And they sold 2.5 years later for $4.9 billion. That's billion with a B. So our enterprise value was about $1 billion or so. And I was basically retired. And like I said, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I told my wife, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be mining because it's too darn tough. But here we go. So, we surround ourselves with wonderful people. And I always say to people, because there's always a suspect when a CEO of a junior company talks, people, well, is he telling the truth or is it a bit embellished? I just say, look, go check the sources. Like for our preliminary economic assessment done in 2018, it said we had the robust economics, 1.6-year payback on the Deerhorn, 42% IRR after tax, and that was based on $1,300 gold and 17 silver. And I said, people, look, don't believe a word I said. The PEA is online. The engineering firm has signed off on it. And the same as with the UBC and the patent. It's like, okay, don't go to me. It's on Global News, did a big special on their evening news that day. And as I say people, because people want to look at graphs and say, well, what happened? You know, your stock took a drought, took a fall in the end of February, and it did. And I was the first one. I woke up that morning and said, what the heck's going on? And the reason is that was the morning that Russia invaded Ukraine. So everyone in Europe sold. So there's reasons for everything. But if people always speculate, oh, there's something being not being truthful, well, fine, then you miss it. Because there are people like me that actually say, don't believe me, here's the sources, figure it out for yourself. But these opportunities don't come along forever.
Absolutely. You know, I always say the success of any company obviously is in their team members and being able to meet milestones and keep shareholder confidence and build off that. Now, I want to give you the floor for the last couple of minutes here, because obviously I appreciate your time and your insight into this space, but I want you to have some time to actually directly address your current shareholders and anyone that might be on the sidelines on why you and your team are the ones to be looking out for.
Well, first of all, we're the only company on the planet that's been after tellurium. You know, we kept quiet about it. So we didn't want to invite competition. So we've got two of the best properties around. And number two is the fact that I surround myself with brilliant people, like on my advisory board, for example, because solar panels are really important. I've got 4 gentlemen that used to be with First Solar. 2 of their geologists, their land package man, and their vice president in charge of metallurgy. And then the other side, because of the battery interest, we've got Don Freshy, who's the CEO of Phoenix Advanced Material out of Trail, BC, who has the patent with the University of British Columbia for lithium tellurium battery. So I surround myself with all these people because I learned early on, if you're a C+ student, you don't want to surround yourself with C+ people, nothing against them, but you want to have pretty bright people there to help you figure out what to do and go forward from there. And as far as the company goes forward, we're sitting on a very high-grade property up in Canada, and gold and silver will make our money, if not for the copper, and the tellurium is a nice little freebie, if you will. The fact that because it's going to be so necessary, people are going to come down and want to talk to you. And the beauty of it, Anil, is if they don't come with a check that makes it interesting to us, the PEA says that we can put the property into production on a small mine scale. For 6 months of the year, we go up there and take ore off the mountain and get it sent away. That the capex for that in 2018 was 28 million Canadian. So let's say with inflation, we're talking 35 million Canadian. If you've got 500,000 ounces gold and 15, 20 million ounces of silver and 500 tons of tellurium after our drilling, I don't think it'd be that difficult, because tellurium right now sells for $100,000 US a ton. So we got lots going forward. So we've done it before. So we know if you build something properly, like I say, it's a movie like Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. If you build a mining property with no red flags and no cracks, because they're going to come out and try and figure out how we can try to negotiate you down. It's not going to happen. So we'll just put it in production ourselves, and I'm 90% sure that we'll end up getting bought out. And one other thing, if I can mention, because we're the only tellurium company, we should change our name to First and Only Tellurium, but we'll stick with First for now. People that have tellurium in their properties phone us to see if we have any interest. And also people that have other interests in tellurium talk to us. So we work on a lot of things behind the scenes, but unlike other guys, we don't put out rumors. If something's 95% sure, we don't talk about it until it's 100% sure. Until it's signed, it doesn't mean anything. So we're different than most, and that's why I think it takes the investing public a little bit longer to get us, because we're not on the front line screaming, look how beautiful we are. We know what we have.
I appreciate your time and insight into this exciting sector and industry. I myself have learned quite a little bit that I wasn't aware of before this conversation. Now, where can our viewers go to find out more information, not only on your company and your team, but also then keep up with your news that you're going to be coming out for the rest of the year?
Yeah, our website is firsttellurium.com, and I think there's a few YouTubes on there recently from thanks to the Metals Investor Forum and thanks to my presentation with you guys there at the pre-DAC. And there's a longer story on it if people really want to get into our First Nations relationship, because the CSE did a show a couple of years ago on mining across Canada and different routes, and I think there's 3 companies per jurisdiction, and most people got 3 to 4 minutes. And with Anna, we ended up getting 51 and a half minutes. Because it's talking about how unique we are. We haven't had a chance to talk about our relationship with Apple or Tiffany and Company based on our First Nations. So we have great partners, to say the least.
Well, I would encourage anybody watching to go to the website and take a look at all of the extensive stuff that Tyrone and his company First Tellurium have been able to accomplish so far. Tyrone, I look forward to hosting you back on our program. Thank you so much for coming on here to educate us about this industry.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to talk about First Tellurium. Thank you.
Much appreciated. Cheers.